Here Sunday to Thursday, 10 to 1, it's Late Night Graham Torrington. Well, he didn't see much of his dad. He was kicked out of school after starting a riot, and he was always in trouble. But Stephen Bartle dreamed of being a Royal Marine Commando. He wanted it so much as a boy, he filled his rucksack with potatoes and rocks, and he would run 10 miles a day to be ready when he was old enough. His story is so full of twists and turns that a movie script is being actually put together about his life, and he's still only 26. And I'm pleased to say that Stephen joins me on the programme. Stephen, thank you very much indeed for coming onto the show tonight.
No, it's my pleasure.
Let's start talking about childhood. Your parents, I believe, split up when you were still a baby. So did you get to see much of your dad?
Yeah, well, they split up when I was about one. So I was raised by my mum, and she did an amazing job. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't see a great deal of my dad. Not as much as I'd have liked to. But obviously, you just make do with the situation that you're in, I guess.
Let's fast forward a little bit to you being 14, and a Royal Marines Commando came to your school to give a recruitment talk. Now, this had a huge impact on your life, didn't it?
It did, yes. It was a Marine, and I think it was like a naval officer that came, and they were both obviously doing recruitment talks for the Marines and the Navy. At the time, I didn't really know what the Marines was, and I think I was messing about in assembly, and the Marine ended up standing me up and telling me off in front of everyone, and making me look like a bit of a fool. And then afterwards, I went up to apologise to him. He started talking to me about the Marines, gave me a leaflet. I did my research, and went into the careers office, had a little chat with him, and then that was it. From that moment, that was literally all I was bothered about, and it kind of took over everything, including school. So, not that I was doing amazing at school anyway, but from that moment on, school was, I was just taking part in it because I had to, really. The Marines was the main focus.
Why do you think that was the turning point? What was it about that visit to your school on that day?
I don't know. I think it was because the way that I've always lived my life, and I don't quite know where this has come from. Maybe it's from my mum. I don't know, but I always want to be the best that I can be. And the Marines, I know, and the majority of others know, are the most elite unit, or one of the most elite units in the world. So it would have been an immense challenge, obviously getting into Marine training, and obviously getting the Green Beret at the end was the ultimate goal. So it just gave me something to aim for, really.
Would you say that you're not particularly an academic and school was all a bit boring to you?
Yes, funnily enough. Yeah, that's most probably quite accurate. I think I'm more creative, more of a creative thinker than academic. Yeah, I mean, it just never really satisfied my thoughts or my imagination, really, being at school.
I can understand that. I was exactly the same at school as well. I found it totally boring, and I couldn't wait to get out and get into the big wide world and do what I wanted to do. So exactly. I can understand exactly where you're coming from. And it was at that point you actually started to prepare to become a Royal Marine. Tell me about the training that you put yourself through to prepare yourself. And we're talking about a 14-year-old lad here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, as I said, whenever I want to do something, I want to do it to the best of my ability. So I will put 100% of my efforts into that, and everything else kind of falls short. So with Marines now being the goal when I was 14, I knew that I needed to get physically ready for that. So yeah, I mean, I started out just obviously going on little runs, and then it had just progressed to weighted runs. So I remember my mom would like fill my backpack up with potatoes or 2-litre bottles of Coke or anything like that, anything that could add weight. And I'd just go off out running. And I grew up in Sheffield, so I lived like southern Sheffield, and I'd end up running up to like Meadow Hall, which was, I don't know how many miles it is, but let's just say 10 miles. It's a fair old distance, and I'd do that like every night, run off, run back, and then obviously just do the other preparations with the circuit training and all the press-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups that you have to get a minimum standard of.
Well, that was the good side of things, because you were preparing yourself for exactly what you wanted to do. But I believe your school life really took a dive because you got kicked out of school. Why?
Well, something that I'm not massively proud of now. However, it was a rather silly thing at the time. Me and a friend were just messing around and ended up getting a group of people. I think we pretended to have a little scuffle, and obviously a crowd formed around us, as they do when you're kids, and then we just took it upon ourselves to run around the school, and people followed, and the aftermath of that was parts of the school ended up getting a little bit trashed. So
you almost seem to be embarrassed about talking about this now.
Funnily enough, I am a little bit now. This is the first time I've spoken about that in a while. So,
how does that feel now then when you're talking about that?
Well, embarrassment does come up. I'm a little bit ashamed of doing it. However, you live your life by making mistakes and learning from them. So, obviously, the fact that I did have a little bit of a naughty childhood, I suppose you could call it. It was a good thing because it ensured that I learned from those mistakes and I'm not living. Well, I learned from them. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so now you're 16 and you applied for the Marines, but it didn't quite work out the way you wanted it to work out, did it?
No, not at the time. At the time, I prepared myself. Obviously, 16. I'm pretty sure it's bang on 16 when you can join. But either way, I prepared myself mentally for the age of 16. That's when I knew that I'd go in. And then when it came to that, obviously my mom, being a very caring mother, didn't want to ship her son off to obviously in a dangerous place. So she wouldn't sign the contract at the time.
Even knowing this is what you really wanted to do, and she'd helped you with the training, she didn't want you to go off and do it.
But there was a good reason why, which I learned afterwards. She just wanted to make sure that I was 100% sure, and I wasn't just rushing into it. And I'm glad she did, because well, that's what mothers are for. That's what good parents will do. They'll ensure that their kids don't make rush decisions, and especially with something like that, if it was a rush decision, I'd have been signing my life away. So it was a care of caution, which I'm very glad that she took upon herself to do, to be honest.
What made you suddenly realise that getting into trouble and being chased by the police wasn't really getting you anywhere?
Well, I guess I don't know. I guess I kind of grew up. There was one incident that happened, and after it had happened, I remember, and if any of my friends at the time are listening to this now, they'll understand the same thing. They'll remember it. I just remember thinking to myself, I can't carry on messing about the way that I am, because if I do, there's no chance of me getting in the Marines. So I just ensured that from that moment on, I knuckled down a little bit, or just a little bit more, and just concentrated on getting in the Marines, because obviously that was the ultimate aim.
That day finally arrived when you got into the Royal Marines training program. So all those sacks of potatoes in your rucksack really did pay off, didn't they?
They did, yeah. I think, so I went in at 16. It actually took me quite a bit longer to finish the training. Training's 32 weeks. I think it took me 64. It took me double because I ended up. I got trench foot, which was quite horrific, which set me back quite a while. And then I fractured my foot, and then I tore quite a few ligaments in one of my legs. So through injuries, it set me back quite a bit within training. But I did end up passing out. I think I just turned 18. But the physical side of it wasn't obviously it was awful. It was extremely difficult to get in. But the physical side of it, I managed to get through okay. But I think the mental side of it was a lot more difficult with my age. Obviously, I was put into training with a bunch of men at that time. I think the average age was like, I don't know, 20, let's just say 22, 23, the average male was. So obviously I was very young. And when it comes to the tactical part of training, I struggled quite a bit, if I'm being honest. However, I must have done all right because I ended up getting the Green Beret at the end.
That's fantastic. So you'd reached your goal. What I need to do is just take a break here for some music, Stephen, but afterwards I'd like to talk about the hell you went through after an attack, and we'll talk more about that in a few moments' time on Late Night Graham Torrington. Late Night Graham Torrington, I'm talking to ex-Royal Marine Commando Stephen Bartle, who served in Afghanistan, only to be attacked on the streets by a gang of thugs. So we heard a few moments ago, you got your Green Beret, so you're still only 18. Skip forward now and tell us when you were deployed to Afghanistan. Was it the job that you thought it was going to be?
Well, when I went to Afghanistan, I was 19 years old. I had a different job from. So I went out with brigade headquarters. So there's 3 commando brigades. At that point there was 4A, 4-2 and 4-5 commando. I went out with the UK brigade headquarters. And so it was my job. I was mainly in Bastion, to be honest, Camp Bastion, which was a British base out there. And then every now and again I would go out with a civilian contractor. So it would be just me and him. I'd coordinate the helicopter transitions and any vehicle movements that we had to make. And it was basically my job to ensure that the civilian contractor was taken to any of the forward operating bases safely and ensure that nothing happened to him and he didn't do anything that would injure himself or me.
Stephen, let me just ask you, was there a defining moment when you were in the job doing what you'd always wanted to do, where you almost had to pinch yourself and think to yourself, boy, this is what I always wanted to do?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest, if there was a defining moment, but I know that when you do go out, or when I went out to Afghanistan, for instance, after the preparation, and obviously then you get flown out there were quite a few significant moments out there when it did kind of put me in my head a bit, and I would think, wow, I'm actually doing this. But I'm not sure about a significant moment that I could pull out of the hat. I'm not sure.
Let's talk about when you came home and the awful attack that happened on the streets. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I returned back from Afghanistan and I went out in Sheffield with a few friends just to kind of obviously celebrate my return. And we were in a club. I ended up, I think I was in the smoking area, and it was quite homeless actually. I asked a woman for a cigarette, and I think one of the guys that was with her, he must have been a fella or something like that, he started kicking up with me. So obviously he started being aggressive towards me. I retaliated towards that, and we ended up getting into a little scrap, a little scuffle. that very quickly escalated when the doorman kicked us both out. However, they stopped my friends from leaving, and they let all his leave. And he had a good 10 or 12 guys with him. And to be honest, as soon as I left the club, I think I forgot about it, because it wasn't really of interest. I'd left. I think I just wanted some food and to go home. And then I turned a corner. One of them must have hit me with quite a good punch, knocked me clean out. But then that is when the aftermath started, and that is when obviously I was knocked out. But that's when they proceeded to obviously kick and stamp. One of them even bit me on my bicep, and I've still got a little jawline scar on my bicep now. And then one of them, I found this out much later, one of them proceeded to use a woman's stiletto heel on my face, and that's what ended up causing the blindness in my right eye.
Oh, that's painful. Very painful.
Well, thankfully I was asleep, so I didn't really feel anything at the time.
So you served in Afghanistan, you come back to this?
Say again, sorry?
I said you served time in Afghanistan, and this is what you came back to?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, to say the least. The way that I see life is, you have to make the best out of every situation, no matter how horrific it is. So I just, to be honest, I went down an extremely dark path. The year or so after that, extremely dark. Thankfully, I did get out of it, and life since then has been rather good.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, because you were medically discharged in 2010, and everything now was hanging in the balance, and you lost your career, everything that you trained for. You went through this dark time. What next?
Well, when I lost my career, that took a while. So I knew that I was going to lose my career straight away. One, because losing one eye as a Marine is not the best thing to happen. And two, it was my right eye, and the weapons that were used at that point were only right-sided operated. So I was pretty useless without my right eye. But it took them a year to actually put me on a medical board and discharge me. So within that year, which I'm not massively proud of now, however, at the time I completely lost interest in the Marines, because I felt that they turned their back on me at that period. So the final year that I was in there, I made quite a few mistakes. I went AWOL at one point, so they ended up trying to put me in Colchester, which is a military prison, which thankfully they didn't manage to do. And then when I left, and I did get medically discharged, I was at a bit of a loss. And to be honest, at certain points, I did come to a point where I was thinking about ending my own life, which is not the strongest route to go down. But at that point, I'd lost everything that I knew, and I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids, so no one really dependent on me apart from my mum. So I kind of gave up.
But the turning point was the training for the Presidential Protection Team.
Yeah. Well, it was. Yeah. So I decided to get into close protection, and the terminology that you use then, that comes from the specific training provider that I used, which was a company in South Africa, in Cape Town, and they train you to an extremely high level, that of a presidential security team level. So yeah, I got into that, and ended up moving down to London and doing a mixture of close protection and maritime security. So that did give me a lot to focus on, yeah.
Yeah, your clients really like the who's who, don't they?
Well, they obviously I can't really say anything about them, but
so we're talking about Hollywood actors, actresses, international singers, musicians, professional golfers, sports personalities, company directors, and the royal family.
Well, yes, and with the royal family, obviously, it's not specific to our royal family, but
sure.
it's that of certain royalty, whether it's across the world or not. But yeah, without being specific, yeah.
All this time, you had a secret passion too for acting, I believe.
Yes, yeah. To be honest, I always wanted to be an actor, but I never had the courage to do it. I always kind of listened to people growing up, kind of bringing me down or dragging me down.
Has that changed now?
People, oh yeah, massively. Yeah. I think a big turning point was when I moved to London, because I moved to London specifically to pursue acting. So I kind of gave everything up in Sheffield, sold my house and everything that I owned really to pursue film work. And to be honest, I haven't looked back, and I doubt that I ever will. It was the best move that I could have ever made, to be honest.
Have we seen you in anything yet?
Well, I mean, when I started out, I was just supporting artist work in a few things that you would have seen. However, I didn't have featured roles in them or featured speaking roles. But then in I think it was 2014, I started making my own stuff. So I made a production which it was actually called Become the Legend. I made it for a motivational purpose. So it's like a short film. People can find it on YouTube. And it was just made to create a bit of motivation within the world and inspiration, and two, I wanted to try my hand at producing and creating a beautiful piece of cinematography. And then since then, the next year, I co-wrote and produced a short film called The Wild Card, which Nick Cohen directed. That ended up being a 30 cast and crew strong film. So for the level that I was at, I was extremely proud of that. And then now we're moving on to, which you mentioned earlier, a film called Recoil, which is kind of based on my life experiences, I guess. And Nick Cohen's going to be directing that as well.
So you're only still 26, and you've got maybe a film of your life. Who would you like to play? Who would you like to play the part of you?
Well, funnily enough, we've already got a firm decision on who we'd like. To be honest, I think it'd be best if I didn't say now. I think it'd be best if I didn't say now. However, the person that I've got in mind is someone extremely current that absolutely everyone in the world knows and would be perfect for.
And are you honoured to think that he's somebody that might actually be playing the part?
Well, if he would consider it, whoever that guy is, I would be extremely honoured, yeah. But obviously, at the minute, I'm just kind of making as many steps as I can towards him and towards the level that we need to be at to get to a person like that anyway.
Stephen, it's a fascinating story. As I said, you're only 26. It's amazing to think what you've been through, and it seems to be as if it's just getting better and better for you. Thank you very much indeed for sharing that story tonight on the programme.
No, that's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
You may be listening to the programme within the last hour, and I was talking to Stephen, a guy who's Commando, Royal Marine Commando, or was. Great interaction that's come in since he's been on the programme. This in from Martin from Blurson. He said, great story about the young man who went into the Marines, was a fighter. Glad to see that he's doing well. He should be an inspiration to all other young people. Good luck to him, says Martin Blurton. And he says, listens to the show every night and enjoys it. Thank you for that. Fairly Elsewhere Streets have been in touch as well. He said, fantastic bloke Stephen is. He has not let anything, even the loss of his sight in one eye, keep him down for long. This bloke is a hero.